Dark Irregulars is summoning demons from the underworld, but is it enough to appease their kings?
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfight, welcome back to another set review of Phantasmal Steed Restoration, and this time we're gonna take a look at the new Dark Irregulars cards. In the previous sets, Dark Irregulars was always a bit behind the other clans in AL4 in terms of consistency and just overall deck power. But this new set might actually turn that a bit around, as the new cards are very powerful and have a lot of potential, and I think this is by far the best set for Dark Irregulars they got since the reboot. So let's take a look at these new cards and see what we can do for Dark Irregulars in general. So first off, they of course got a reprint set of the current triggers, and I'm just gonna give them 1 star as they are just generic reprints. But they did get a new crit trigger just like all the other clans in Wave 2, and for them that is Dark Knight of Nightmareland, and I'm just gonna give this card 3 stars as it's just a solid addition to the lineup for the triggers. They also got a new starter, and for them that is this new starter, Devil in Shadows, and even though the artwork is pretty amazing, I'm still only gonna give it 1 star as it's just a generic reprint in terms of starter quality, as it has the same similar skill. Then in terms of vanillas, they got a new grade 1 9k, and for them that is Warlike Poisoner. I'm not a fan of these 9k grade 1s, and for Dark Irregulars it also doesn't really do anything for the clan. It doesn't interact with anything at all, so I'm just gonna give it 1 star as you're probably not gonna run it in any type of build. For the second vanilla that they got in this set, they got the 15k Shield Grade 2 Evil Eye Artist. And we haven't really seen these type of vanillas all that often. We did have one for Grand Blue, but not a lot of clans do have these cards. But just like Grand Blue, Dark Irregulars can actually use these kinds of vanillas because we have Dentarian. We can use that extra shield value as we can intercept from the soul, so by randomly soul charging this unit, you will get more value out of it. And for that, I'm definitely gonna give this one 2 stars as it is still a very generic vanilla, but it does have some uses for that specific build, so it's not outright garbage like the other grade 1 9k vanilla. Then of course they also got the new grade 1 draw drop PG, and that for them is Appalling Threat, and just like all the other grade 1 PGs, I'm gonna give them 3 stars as they open up a lot more deck building options with in conjunction of the new third crit trigger. Then when we dive right into the unique card for Dark Irregulars, we start off with Variance Drag Form, a new grade 3 for them with a protect marker, and its skill is auto Vanguard the Vanguard circle. When placed, costs counter +1, put a card from your damage zone into your soul, put a grade 2 or greater card from your soul into your hand, and put the top card of your deck into the damage zone face down. So a lot of things are happening, but basically what you're doing is you put a card from your damage zone in your soul, a card from your soul into your hand, and then you replace the card from the damage zone with the card from the top of your deck, and it's gonna go face down. So if you're going to counterblast, you want to choose that unit that you just counterblast or another face down card, otherwise this skill will cost you 2 counterblast effectively, so that's not a great thing to do. But mainly what this card is functioning for is to put specific cards into your soul if they unluckily been sent to the damage zone, but also to get a certain grade 2 or grade 3s into your hand, so you can fix your right target for next turn, or you have a specific key unit that you need to call to the Rigger Circle with a combo play for that, for example. So this card does open up a lot of options, but Dark Irregulars have a lot more useful grade 3s, and certainly with how Dark Irregulars is running, your grade 3s are one of your strongest units that you need to use for offensive plays. So for that I'm only going to give it 2 stars as, yes, the skill does a lot, but I don't think it's enough to make it a very valuable asset for most builds. Probably going to be run in some budget builds, but not in the main support line. Then a card that is going to be run in the main support line for a lot of decks, that is a new grade 1 Yellow Bolt. And this card has the following skills: auto on Rigger Circle, when it attacks a grade 2 or greater, soul charge 1, and this unit gets power plus 5k until the end of battle. So basically this unit is going to beat over any type of unit. It's going to hit almost anything, because if it's face up against a grade 1, it's an 8k against an 8k in most scenarios, so it can hit. But it's up against a grade 2 or grade 3, it turns into a 13k, meaning Dark Irregulars now finally has a solid beater that isn't restricted to a certain condition that's awkward to fulfill. This is something they actually need. But also the bonus on top of it, that it soul charges when attacking certain units, is even better. So this already makes it a very strong unit. But then we got the second ability, which is the icing on top, and that's auto. When rode upon, you may soul charge 2. If you soul charge 1 or more trigger units, draw a card. So meaning that when you ride on top of it, you're going to +2 on soul. And there is no downside to this card, because if you sadly soul charge a trigger or 2 triggers, you get a plus out of it. But if you didn't soul charge 2 crit units, well, great, you didn't soul charge 2 crits or 2 triggers, meaning they are still in your deck. So whatever happens, you're gonna benefit from the effect of riding on top of this unit. And if you cannot ride it, you can just call to the Vanguard circle, and it's a solid beater that can accelerate your engine. So this is definitely a 5-star card in my mind, as it is such a useful universal unit that can be run in any type of Dark Irregulars build, and it's gonna benefit the deck. Then last of the generic support card that can be used in any type of build, I want to go over a new type of finisher that is very unique in its playstyle, as that is Hope on Damp. And this grade 3 has the following skill. Auto on Vanguard and Rearguard circle, one place. If your soul has 20 or more cards, until the end of turn, when your opponent will call cards from his or her hand to the Guardian circle, he or she must call cards with some of their original shield being 20k. So when you can fulfill this card, your opponent is in a world of hurt, as they need to guard in intervals of 20k shield every time that they want to guard. So meaning that if you attack with a 13k against their 30k, they need to place 20k shield onto the board. And keep in mind, it states original shield value. So units that will gain additional shield value, it will not count to this cost. Also cards like Dyliner that gives other grade 3s +10k shield, that +10k would not be regarded for the shield value, so that grade 3s are still regarded as 0 shield for this skill condition. So it's gonna screw with your opponent's plays, and they are going to be forced to guard very awkwardly, as they cannot easily put 2 15k shields onto the board, as that is 30k and not 20. And if you attack with a high enough number where they need to guard for 30 or 35 or maybe 40, then they need to guard twice with intervals of 20. As they need to be at a sum of 20 each time they're gonna place cards. And that's something to be noticed of for importance for other cards with interactions, as we're gonna talk with cards in this set that will interact very well with this card as well. So this is going to put your opponent in a very awkward position in terms of guarding. And it can be that they cannot make enough 20s to keep guarding your attacks or your strong enough attacks. So even if they have maybe 8 or 9 cards in hand, they might not be able to guard your attacks at all. So this card is very potent in that sense. And because it's on place for Vanguard and Rearguard circle, means you can just combine it with NOK for a very late game scenario where you just run one copy of this thing, and with the condition that you need to have 20 in soul, you're basically almost gone through your entire deck. So just running one copy will most likely end it up in your soul when you keep soul charging a lot of cards. Maybe you draw on it, but with no life gain you can then put it into your soul anyways. So it is a perfect fit for the deck as well. So this is a very potent card, and it's going to be even more insane with another card later down the road in this video. So keep up for that. And with that in mind, I think this is a solid 4-star card, as it's another very strong finisher for Dark Irregulars, and it's a very potent one at that, because you can just run it at a very low amount, and it doesn't conflict with its skill at all for that scenario. Then next up, we've got a series of cards that work with multiple copies of themselves, having those copies into the soul. And this is where this support line focuses around. Even the new VR has a similar skill with this multiple copies of unit in the soul to fulfill some certain skill conditions. And this is also the reason why Hope on Damp is a very viable asset in this particular set, as we have a lot of access soul charging and also filtering soul charging, very specific soul charging, which will accelerate your soul count very quick. And you can see how fast Dark Irregulars is going to fill their soul with these upcoming cards. But first, let's take a look at the grade 2 that works with this interaction. And this one is Variance Shot Arm, and its skill is Auto and Rearguard circle. When it attacks a Vanguard while boosted, this unit gets power plus 6k until the end of the battle. If your soul has 2 or more Variance Shot Arm, then cost counter plus 1, choose one of your opponent's rearguards and retire it. So basically, this is a solid 23k column extender, as it will become a 15k attacker when it's boosted and will probably be boosted by an 8k, so it's a 23k column. That's a solid number for a Protect clan to make, and it's something that Dark Irregulars didn't really have access to on a consistent basis, so this is a nice addition. But also the added bonus, if you have multiple copies in the soul, that you can retire something for a counterblast, does synergize really well with Nantarian's aspect with the whole retire and then soul charging a lot of cards, so it is also a synergy card for that engine as well. So overall, it's a solid attacker. It doesn't really do as much as you would expect of a Dark Irregulars card, but I think making the power column as well as the potential retire is a nice option for the deck and for the clan itself. So I'm gonna give it 3 stars, as it's just a solid option. Then next we have a grade 3 that is a very high powered beatstick, and that is Rigger Twister. And its skill is Continuous on Rigger Circle. If your soul has 2 or more Rigger Twisters, this unit cannot be retired by card effects, and it gets power plus 15k. So it's a solid 27k beater, and it cannot be retired during either player's turn. So that's a very beefy and sticky unit onto the board that neither players actually can get rid of. And that's an important notice that neither players can get rid of, as we're gonna see with the VR, that something that you can interact with your own units by retiring stuff. So this is a nice addition to that as well. However, I'm only gonna give it 2 stars, as for once, it's just a beatstick and it sticks you on the board, but it's also a grade 3 without a protect marker, so you can only use it as a rear guard. It doesn't really synergize with your other main engine grade 3s like No Life King. It also really doesn't do that much in advance of your soul or that kind of stuff. It's just a beater on its own that is reliant on other cards to make it a tough beater. But it does have some value in the sense that a 27k unit that's sticky on the board is very threatening against a lot of clans, so it's not completely useless. The next we got a very strong new grade 1 that is Variance Killer Till, and its skill is Act on Rearguard Circle. Once per turn, cast Rest this unit and put a card from your damage zone or drop zone into your soul. If you put a card from your damage zone, put the top card of your deck into your damage zone face down. And if your soul has 3 Variance Killer Till, countercharge 1 and stand this unit. So for a rest, you can selectively soul charge a unit into your soul from the drop zone or out of damage zone. That is an insane, very powerful skill, especially with all these cards that require you to have multiple copies of themselves in the soul. By selectively soul charging, you're going to get more value out of them. And combine it with something like the Nantarian that can intercept from the soul, put them to the drop zone, and then you can use Variance Killer Tail to put those units back into the soul. You can have some very defensive decks by doing that. And also you can selectively soul charging, meaning the chance of randomly soul charging a crit trigger or a trigger from your deck is significantly lower, making this card even better. But the icing on the cake of this card is the fact that if you have multiple copies of her in the soul, she countercharge. And this will be done for just resting unit, but it then stands itself. So for doing actually nothing, you can get a specific card in your soul and you countercharge one. That's pretty insane. Yeah, it's only once per turn, but that's because it stands itself, so you could potentially do that for infinity. But if you have 3 of these things in the back row and just use them to put stuff back into your soul, with something like the Nantarian, and depending on what kind of clan you're facing, you can be in a cannot die scenario and you can just stall the game very effectively and just pressure your opponent out by just keeping attacking. So yeah, that's some interesting things you can try to come up with this card. So yeah, for my take, it's definitely a 4-star card, as it's just a insane engine tool for Dark Irregulars, and this is going to be a vital card for, I think, a long time. Then next up, we've got a grade 1 that's very similar to the Twister grade 3, and that's Variance Mega Wing. And this grade 1, 7k, has the following skill. Continues on Rearguard Circle. If your soul has 2 or more Variance Mega Wing, this unit cannot be retired by card effects, and it gets power plus 10k. So it becomes a 70k booster or attacker that cannot be retired, so it's a sticky unit as well. This is a little bit better than the grade 3 because it's not a grade 3 and it's a grade 1, so meaning it can also be used as a booster for all kinds of units. Your Vanguard, a specific Rearguard grade 2 with an on-hit, or maybe a guard restrict. So it does have more value in that sense. And also the grade 1 spots do have more flexibility to them. So in that sense, I'm going to give it 3 stars. As yes, the 7k body might be a little bit bad, but with an added 10k, I don't think that's a lot of problem because it makes very high powered columns. And that's something that Dark Irregulars is very lacking. Then next we've got a very interesting grade 2 that is Icicle Resistant. And this one has 2 skills. Auto, when it's retired from the Guardian Circle during the battle it intercepted, you may put this card into your soul. So this is a +1 on soul for intercepting, so that's a 5k shield you're getting for free basically. Well, in most cases, this thing is going to be either targeted by your opponent or they're just going to ignore it because it's just 5k. So depending on what your opponent is doing, they might or might not attack it. But the interesting thing is it does synergize really well with something like the Dentarian, as you can intercept with it, it puts it in the soul, and then you can intercept from the soul once again. However, it sadly doesn't interact with Dentarian on the way that you can infinitely intercept with it, because putting it from the soul to the Guardian Circle isn't referred as an intercept. It's just a superior call to the Guardian Circle. So if you use a Dentarian skill, it's then removed, it's then sent to the drop zone. So sadly, no infinite shield value, but what do you expect? They're not trying to break the game. But it also got the second ability, and it's Act in Soul, cast, bind discard, and one of your units get power plus 10k until the end of turn. So this skill is very useful for a final turn scenario, because if you do something like NOK or Master Fifth Element or Hope on Dump or the grade 2 that we're going to talk about afterwards, Variance Hard Leg, if you're going to put extra power onto the board, that power can be enough to overwhelm your opponent. And a good example with Master Fifth Element, you're gonna soul blast your entire soul anyways, and you might as well get more use out of it. So if you're gonna resend your units multiple times, giving those units additional power will mean that that additional power will have multiple times of effectiveness for each and every single attack. So this can be very deadly in those scenarios. Also with the guard restrict on Hope on Dump, where they need to guard for intervals of 20k, getting an additional 10 or 20k on those units, meaning they need to guard multiple times as 20, can be enough to overwhelm your opponent as well. So this is a very solid addition for these kinds of builds, and I think it's a solid 3-star card. It does have some nice interactions with other cards, it does have some value on its own, it can put itself into the soul if it wants to, so you have a lot of flexibility with this card for playing it with it. So I think it's a solid 3-star card in its own right. Then next up, the card that I was just referring to, Variance Hard Lag, and this is another killer card for Dark Irregulars, as it skills Auto Riggered Circle. When placed, if your soul has 3 or more cards with different card names and they have 3 or more cards with the same card name until end of turn, when your opponent would call from his or her hand to the Guardian Circle, he or she must call 3 or more at the same time. So to clarify what this card condition is, it's that you have 3 different cards and you have 3 copies of those 3 different cards. So you have 3 sets of 3 in your soul. So you could fulfill this with just 9 cards. You have 3 of a grade 1, 3 of a grade 2, and 3 of a grade 3, the same cards, and then the condition is met when you place this card on the Riggered Circle. And it's just given the supercharged Belladora skill that we've seen with Nova Grappler with their VR hero, that they need to call 3 or more cards from hand to guard. That in itself is already very powerful, because if they want to perfect guard your attack, they need to ditch 4 cards effectively to make the perfect guard count. And that in itself is already a kill condition. That's a win condition for Dark Irregulars in its own regard. And this is going to be a vital card for a lot of decks, and this can be enough to make Dark Irregulars a threatening clan in general. But if we combine it with Hope on Damp, you basically won the game if they're sitting at 4 or 5 damage and you're swinging with crits. Because there's no way that they can guard your attacks, because not only are they forced to guard with 3 or more cards each time they want to guard, they need to guard in intervals of 20k shields. Meaning if you attack with a high enough number, which they are forced to guard for 25 to make that guard count, they need to call 6 guardians, at least. Because they need to call 3 units that are together 20k, and then they need to call another 3 units that are together 20k. That's for one attack, 6 cards in hand. Yeah, no deck can survive that. And that's just that they have 3 cards of intervals of 20 each and every single time. Probably they can only make maybe 1 set, and maybe 2, and that's about it. So this combination is insane, but that's a very situational restriction to get both condition off, and you're just gonna play it in most cases just on its own without Hope on Damp, and in those scenarios this card is already good enough, as this Extreme Battle Door effect with cards like NOK with a multi-attack as well as Master Fifth Element can just spell doom for your opponent, and that's why it's definitely a 5-star card in my book, as this is going to be once again a very vital and key component card for the clan that's probably going to be used for a long time. Then next up we've got a blast from the past from the G era, and that's Were Tiger Jaeger, and its skill is auto when it's retired on a Rigid Circle, Guardian Circle, cost Counterblast 1 and put this card into your soul. So this is a card that can put itself into the soul and you can guard with it, so it's a 10k shield that also goes to your soul. You can also use it as a booster, so if you're against a control clan you can put it into your soul. And the Counterblast might sound a bit harsh, but when you take a look at Variant's Killer Till that we just talked about, which is essentially a free counter charge, yeah, that Counterblast isn't really a problem at all, so that's pretty good. But then we got the second ability, and that makes the Counterblast cost even better, because auto in soul, when your opponent's rearguard is retired by a card effect, cost bind this card and draw a card. So you're basically binding his unit and you draw a card. So if you combine these two skills together, it's for a Counterblast, and removing this card, you draw a card. So that's actually not that bad. And sure, you need to be in a condition where you retire something from your opponent through a skill and not just by attacking. But with the Dentarian build, as well as the new VR build with Belphegor, this is going to be very easy to fulfill. And with another card, you can just shove 3 copies of this thing into your soul for 1 Counterblast, and then bind all 3 and draw 3 cards. So that's also a pretty solid draw engine you have right there. So it synergizes with other cards. You can also use it in combination with No Life King, as you can put 3 copies onto the field, restand with No Life King by shoving 3 of these into your soul, and that's also 1 Counterblast, but that 1 Counterblast was actually used for restanding your Vanguard, so the cost of minusing on hand turns into a wash, because then you can potentially Soul Blast them, and by Soul binding them to draw another card, so you actually battle against the minus from NOK at the same time. So this card has a lot of options for Dark Irregulars as well, so I think it's a solid 4-star card, and even though the artwork is horrendous, the card itself is very playable. Then next, we've got a new support card for Dentarian, and this is obviously a support card for Dentarian, as we have Number of Terror. And this new grade 3 with the Protect marker has the following skills. Auto on Rigid Circle and Guardian Circle, when placed, if your soul has 10 or more cards, this unit gets power plus 10k, shield plus 10k until the end of turn. So it's a solid 22k attacker in your offensive, but when you put it into the soul, you can call it out with Dentarian skill, and it's a solid 10k shield as well. So you can use it as an attacker as well as a defender. It's a pretty good concept of a card, and we already had another card, grade 3, in the previous sets that works similar, but this just has higher stats on the card. So it's a direct upgrade of that support grade 3 for Dentarians. That's already is a pretty good upgrade. But then we get the second ability, which is also a bit familiar to the grade 3. So in hindsight, this is just a power creep version of the old support card, but seeing as that was a rare and this is double rare, it makes sense, as its second ability is Auto Rigid Circle. When it attacks a Vanguard, if your soul has 10 or more cards, put one of your other rearguards into the soul and draw 2 cards. You are basically adding more cards to your hand, so it increases the consistency as well as the survivability and protectability of Dentarian, but also the fact that you put a rearguard into soul is pretty good in a Dentarian build, as you are probably gonna put a rested unit in the soul, so you don't minus on attacks. You can also put a booster, but you're probably gonna use a attacker that's rested, as you can put a grade 2 into the soul. And because you put a grade 2 in the soul, you can then give multiple units onto the field plus 5k power. So this column will get an increase of 10k, and your booster behind your Vanguard gets another 5k. So it synergizes with that as well, though there is a lot of potential in this card, and it is just insanely good with Dentarian. And now we get to the final 2 cards, and these cards are basically the bulk of the new deck for Dark Irregulars, and it established this new mechanic with multiple copies into the soul, as they are gonna fix that whole thing very easily, as we have this grade 2 Emblem Master, and its first skill is very simple. It's continuous on Rigid and Guardian Circle. If your soul has 7 or more cards, this unit gets power plus 5k and shield plus 5k. So a 10k interceptor and a 14k attacker. Solid. That's just solid. And the 7 cards in soul is no problem to fulfill because you have a lot of cards that put things in the soul. And we also have his other skill, that is Auto Vanguard and Vanguard Circle. When placed, cost counter +1, search your deck and drop zone for up a total of 3 cards with the same card name as one of your units and put them into your soul. If you search your deck, shuffle your deck. So this card can instantly fulfill one of those other cards that have multiple card restrictions in one go. You can put 3 variant Killer Tails into the soul, so you can get the free counter charge and all that kind of stuff. You can put the Twister grid free. You can also put things for variant Hard Leg as well. So this is gonna help the deck's consistency tremendously. But also just on a generic focus for Dark Irregulars, the fact that you can search out 3 cards from your deck and soul charge them, it's an effective filter for your deck as well. So you're not risking for soul charging accidentally triggers. So the chance of getting triggers is going to be very high, especially if you resolve this skill 1 or 2 times. That's insane. So this card is definitely in my book a 5-star card, as it helps the new engine, it helps Dark Irregulars in general, not only by the excessive soul charging, but also thanks to his power and shield value, making it a good beater as well as a defender at the same time. So it's a solid card on all fronts. But then we get the new VR for Dark Irregulars, and this thing is a literal demon, as we have Demonic Deep Phantasmal Emperor Bruthus. And this new VR for Dark Irregulars has the following skills. First one, act on Vanguard Circle once per turn, counter +1, look at all your cards in your deck, search for up to 3 cards with the same card name from among them, and reveal them. And if your soul has a card with the same card name as those cards, put one of the revealed cards into your hand and put the rest into your soul and shuffle your deck. Once again, a very effective soul charging engine, just like Emblem Master. The only difference is, and that's what's going to make this card, in my opinion, a lot better, is that Emblem Master, you need to have a unit onto the field, and it can choose itself as well, but you need to have units onto the field, and that's your target. This one is just whatever in your soul. So your right target for grid 1 is an option, your right target for grid 2 is an option, and your randomly soul charging in the early game will increase your options as well. And it will give you a card in hand. So if you accidentally maybe soul charge something like your variant Killer Tail and you want to use that counter charge engine, well, by choosing her from your soul, you put 2 copies into the soul and you get 1 copy to hand, meaning you can immediately call it and use her skill completely, as you have 3 in your soul as well. It can target things like the Weretiger Jaeger for more draw potential. It can target things like Hard Killer Leg to have it already in hand, so you can fix things while basically searching things to hand and filling your soul at the same time, which also increases the chance of getting you triggers. So overall, this is a pretty solid skill in its in what it does. The only downside to this card is that you cannot choose cards that aren't in your soul. So meaning if you don't have a grade 3 in your soul, you just showcase 3 grade 3s, you show them, and then they all go back to the deck. You need to have a specific card in your soul. So if your soul isn't ideally with good targets, then this card is a little bit awkward, but the same can be said for Emblem Master if your rearguard zones or your units on the field don't have ideally targets. But in general, it doesn't really matter what your targets are, as long as it aren't triggers, you're fine, as it works towards either your soul count or it works towards your condition for variance Hard Leg. But then this unit has an additional skill, and it's Auto and Vanguard Circle. When it attacks, if your soul has 2 or more grade 3 cards, choose one of your opponent's rearguards, retire it, and this card gets that unit's power and critical until the end of the battle. Added amounts included. Alright, so important thing about that is that it counts Protect 2 markers and Force 2 markers, as those markers are live and active even during your opponent's turn. Excel 1, Excel 2, and Force 1 aren't. Those are only live during the player's turn, which has those markers onto the field. So meaning that if your opponent is playing Force 2 and you retire their unit onto a Force 2, this unit gains an additional 2 crit. The 1 crit that the unit originally has, but also the additional crit as the Force 2 changes the original crit of this unit to 2. So that's a thing to keep in mind. Also with Protect, that additional 5k each Protect marker gives that unit will be added onto that unit when it's going to be retired by your new VR. So it synergizes with that as well. Also, cards that have continuous skills that work during either player's turn those powers and those additional effects will be absorbed by Brufus. So keep that in mind while facing against Dark Irregulars, or when you're playing this card, you know which power you're going to get or whatnot. Then for the condition that you need to have 2 Great Freeze, well, you can just target it with the first skill and you're Gucci. If you have a Great Freeze Soul, perfect. You're done. Now, a thing to note, which I was hinting before, we have the Twister and we have the Grade 1. When their condition is fulfilled, they cannot be retired, but they do have the additional power. Meaning, Brufus doesn't state that you need to retire something of your opponent. You can also retire one of your rear guards. So, meaning you can choose one of those units and you will gain the additional power, but those units will not be retired, they stay on the field. That's where their skill comes in handy with something like Brufus. Also, a thing to note is that this second ability is mandatory. It is mandatory the moment that you have 2 or more Great Freeze in cards. You need to choose a rear guard from either your or your opponent. So if you're up against a clan that has an empty field, like Pale Moon Lucia for example, yeah, you're going to need to be retiring one of your own units. So in that case, the Grade 1 and the Grade 3 is an excellent addition, as you don't minus on the field. So that's why I have more value for the Grade 1 than the Grade 3, as it is a little bit more flexible and it's good in combination with the VR against certain matchup that will force you to sacrifice your own units. On overall value, this is in my opinion definitely a 5-star card, as it is an excellent filter option for your deck. It's also a very good tool to accelerate your soul count, as well as meeting the condition of different cards for the clan. And also the addition of free retire with extra power and extra crit, because this thing will swing for 2 crits almost all the time, and potentially even 3 crits with a lot of power. So it's a solid card for Dark Irregulars, and combine this thing with other cards like No Life King can be very deadly, as you are going to swing with 3 crits potentially, and that is insane for a Vanguard attack. So overall, we've seen a lot of interesting stuff. We have this new thing where we're going to focus on multiple copies into the soul, as well as these very specific filter options for soul charging specific cards. But besides that, we also got some nice support card for Dark Irregulars in general with just generic support. And we also got a new support Grade 3 from Tentarian, making the deck all the more viable and just opening up a lot of options for the clan. I think this is a very interesting but also a very consistent and good support wave for Dark Irregulars, and without a doubt probably one of their best supports in the V era to date. And that rounds about everything up for this set review for Dark Irregulars for Phantasmal Steed Restoration. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of these new cards for Dark Irregulars, as there is a lot to go over. There's a lot for everybody, there's a lot of support and a lot of interesting things, and I think a lot of Dark Irregulars players are very happy with this new support, even though we sadly didn't get a Mon. But I think we cannot complain with Brufus and the other cards that were in this set. So let me know all your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below, and let the discussion going. In the meantime, I want to thank my Patreon supporters for making this video and everything happening on the channel. You guys, as always, are amazing. If you do want to support the channel and everything that's happening on the channel, then hit the subscribe button and the bell button to be updated for future videos, as well as liking and sharing it with all your friends. But if you want to support us a little bit more directly, then go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one.